Good evening, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us for this very special event. I would like to say that our Chief of Staff, Jocelyn Ruel-Kaskar, has joined us on behalf of Mayor Cahill. Jocelyn and I and Mayor Cahill, as well as Pauline Tixera, our Human Resources Director, are part of the DEIB, which is our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Leadership Team. And I'm very pleased that she's here with us today. I would like to welcome Jocelyn to make some opening remarks on behalf of the City of Beverly. Thank you.
Thanks, Wangari. So you'll probably be welcomed a bunch more times, but welcome to the Cabot for tonight's City of Beverly sponsored community conversation on building a more inclusive Beverly. I am Jocelyn Ruel-Kaskar. I'm Chief of Staff to Mayor Cahill, who couldn't be here tonight, but sends his best wishes for a thoughtful and informative session. As you'll learn tonight, the City of Beverly has been working hard since 2020 to understand and shape an inclusive community. We are taking the lessons learned from our 2022 racial equity audit and turning them into action items that will expand language access, promote digital equity, advance racial equity, and foster a stronger sense of belonging and cultural awareness for all residents. This is a marathon, not a sprint, and the revelations, awareness, and changes won't happen overnight, but they are happening. Thank you to Wangari Fahari, the City of Beverly Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Director, our panel of valued municipal employees, the staff here at the beautiful Cabot Theater, and you, the community, for everything that you have and will contribute to tonight's event. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so this is a very deep and long and very old conversation in terms of how far we could go back when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. But with your permission, I would like to talk about specifically about the 2022 work up to where we are today. And I'm hoping by taking this time, it's going to be about 20 to 25 minutes of your time to just run through the state of the DIB work currently in Beverly. We know that DI is a much larger conversation nationally, but we are very curious, I guess, today specifically in what it has to do with Beverly, how we are working together to advance equity as well as build a more inclusive Beverly. My name is Wangari, and I am the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Director here in Beverly. So first, we'll be using a lot of the DEIB language, and I just wanted to share with you that diversity is about representation and the makeup of Beverly's community. When I talk about diversity, I'm talking about the representation and the makeup of our community. When I talk about equity, equity is ensuring that everyone has access to the same opportunities. Inclusion involves bringing traditionally excluded individuals or groups into processes, activities, and decisions, policymaking in a way that shares power. When I took office in 2023, we added belonging. And belonging is something that is a little bit personal to me because I grew up in Kenya and I moved to Beverly about 9 years ago. And though DEI did strike a chord with me, I felt like belonging needed to be added in the office work. And belonging is offering the opportunity for city staff and residents to feel connected to each other, creating an environment of safety and enabling all people to feel safe around each other without fear or workplace microaggressions. So I wanted to introduce you to our race equity audit. I know you heard Jocelyn mention it. I know we've had this conversation here maybe a couple of years ago with my predecessor, Mr. Abu Toppin, where in 2022, the City of Beverly retained the consulting services of HRNA advisors to conduct a racial equity audit for city policies, procedures, and programs. The goal of the audit was not to uncover racism or racist members of our government or community. Rather, the importance of the audit was to ensure racial equity, which is when race can no longer determine or be used to predict life outcomes and outcomes of all groups, and building a more inclusive Beverly that is equitable for all. I wanted to put that out there because I think sometimes the racial equity audit can be a sensitive conversation, especially when it's personalized. In Beverly, that's not what we aim for. We try to focus on our operations and our strategies. And I encourage you, as you experience in this program tonight, to think of some questions that are aligned with this vision. So this is a page out of our race equity audit that will give you a little bit of an idea of what the audit findings focused on. So we talked about how representative is the staff in relation to the diversity of our community. We talked about how much training and support staff receive to support them in this conversation, and how accessible is our departments to diverse community members. And when we talk about diverse community members, we're talking about people of color, people with disabilities who are hard of hearing. We're talking about our LGBTQ members. It's encompassing every person that lives and works in Beverly. How well does the department gain awareness of and understand the needs of diverse community members? How does the department incorporate diverse perspectives? How well does the department respond to urgent needs of diverse community? And Beverly being about 95%, I think we're more than that. So I'd say about 85% white. We have not had ample experience in reaching our diverse communities. So these questions kind of start to get our mind turning on some of the practices that could lead to accessing these communities and into encouraging and building pathways for these communities to access our services and resources. We also talked about accountability in the race equity audit. How accountable is the department to track and report information and metrics to meet these goals? So when I took office in 2023, the first thing I sought to do was to analyze the racial equity audit and really understand what it meant, what it was saying, and then use that to create action plans and strategies. Using the findings for the racial equity audit to guide and develop a framework that will guide the city's policies and practices going forward was not an easy task. It also required that we understand the history of Beverly. It required that we build trust in city government to have these conversations. It required that we understand the history of inequity across the nation as well. So we're going to be using REAP a lot today. And while Mayor is not here, he did ask me if I have something for so if you do, share it with me. But today we'll be saying REAP a lot, which is where we are in the city of Beverly, which is racial equity action planning. So as I mentioned earlier, informed by a racial equity audit and inspired by the definition for racial equity, which is that identity and backgrounds can no longer determine how far someone goes in life, and the support of city departments with Mayor Cahill, city councilors, Chief of Staff Jocelyn Ruel, you just met her, our Human Resources Department, my office, and consultants, HRNA consultants, and your community voice, we were able to launch REAP. What is REAP? So this is where I'm learning as a DI practitioner that this work is both a product, but it's also a process. And those two have to have a really nice balance for there to be a thriving community. REAP is a process of implementing and developing plans to operationalize the changes necessary to meet the goals of a racially equitable and more inclusive Beverly. So as a city, Beverly is not immune to potentially having contributed to discriminating or inequitable systems that have been established. It's a hard truth to swallow. and I think the best thing we can do is to just normalize that. And I think we've all inherited a home that needs work, and I think that's what we did. We inherited a home that needs a little bit of work that is not necessarily immune to having contributed to discriminating or inequitable systems. And with this awareness, we were able to move forward. We learned through our race equity workshops through working with HRNA, these amazing consultants that we have invited to the city to help facilitate these conversations across government. Very hard conversations that take positivity and being centered in meeting the needs of marginalized people. You have to have that compassion and that patience to go through this process. We learned that these systems remain in place when there's not an intentional examination to expose or acknowledge a disparate system that may contribute to racial inequities. We focused on three things: contextualizing inequity within a larger narrative of America and Beverly history. And we understood from the data that this has happened and is still happening here. We were able to situate that conversation with a larger commitment by city leadership to take action. We are also providing an opportunity for our staff to understand definitions, begin to self-identify, and draw connections. So, how is Beverly involved in this? I know when I took office, there was about a year when my office had no leadership, and this was post the race equity audit. When I took office, there was a conversation of what does this have to do with Beverly? There's no racism in Beverly. We are not in the South. We did not have plantations in Beverly. So this has nothing to do with us. And in order to be able to move the work forward, we needed to create a deeper understanding as to what this had to do with us. We learned that historically residents in Beverly utilized slave labor more than their inland counterparts. In 1754, Beverly's census recorded over 4,500 enslaved people. Wealth created by involvement in the transatlantic slave trade and its related industries, which were ram, timber, shipbuilding, fisheries, and agriculture, formed the bedrock of Boston's economy. And we all know we have those wonderful summer homes that were fueled with that beautiful Boston's economy. In the 19th century, Bostonians invested their profits from the transatlantic slave trade in new manufacturing industries like textiles, with Senator Charles Sumner, which Sumner described as unhallowed alliance between the lords, the lash, and the lords of the loom. We also see that as the United States grew, the benefits of slave labor multiplied. Prominent families in Beverly built their wealth from slave labor. George Cabot was a senator and prolific slave trader. His relative, John Cabot, was a partner in the country's first cotton mill, the Beverly Cotton Manufactory. In 1791, we see Cabot signing the first Fugitive Slave Act, a type of legislation that required the returning of runaway slaves to their owners. We see prominent families in coastal cities here gaining their wealth from building ships that often were used in triangular trade or producing crops that would sell to Europe and sail on the same ships. Slave labor helped these families build wealth through the exploitation of slave labor. Also, we see some of the racist language in real estate deeds ensured that certain communities stayed white only. And this is something that I thought a lot about when I first moved here as an immigrant, as a woman of color, was why there were more people that looked like me. I always wondered why. And the more that I'm learning about our history, I can see how over time we might have programmed our city not to be inclusive. We see that in Beverly, our minority communities that have moved here in the last 10 years are still struggling. So not only are we seeing the history, not only are we understanding how the wealth was built, we also seeing that disparity and continuing. We are seeing that our more 80,000 to 83,000 communities we're seeing our communities that are making 80,000 or more still representing white communities and not much of the non-communities, with the Black African American community about 54,000 and our Hispanic Latino community at 29,000. Why build a more inclusive Beverly? When people are marginalized, our entire economy and community suffers. limiting the contributions and experiences of some of our residents and community members leaves us with one-sided perspectives and doesn't give us as a community an opportunity to be and achieve all that we can or are capable of being. So advancing racial equity and addressing systemic racism will improve long-term outcomes for all our residents, friends, and community members. So when we talk about REAP, we kicked that off in 2023 by developing plans and operationalizing the changes necessary to meet the goals of a racially equitable Beverly, informed by the audit and a deep understanding of this history that I just shared, your community voice, driven by our commitment to institutionalize DIB across city government and schools, and always leadership. I believe that the leadership of Mayor Michael Cahill and our city councilors and their support for this work has benefited us a lot in advancing equity in Beverly, but also making it more inclusive. REAP is a process. How is REAP a process? After working with HRNA advisors, we were able to establish these 6 categories that you see here. Discovery phase, establishing the collective vision, and the other 4. Discovery phase is that first beginning space where we started learning about the history of inequity in the nation, starting to really build buy-in in the necessity of the work and the realness of the work, and that it's still happening here. When we, as the city of Beverly government and schools, acknowledge that this work is important and it's necessary to building a thriving and resilient Beverly, we were able to come together and establish a collective vision. A lot of this part of work is internal, is about addressing our identities, how we connect with ourselves, how we connect with others, and how that affects how we allocate resources. And then taking that further is assessing, soliciting, and analyzing data, such as race equity audits, doing quantitative surveys across the city to find out why people are not accessing services or why we're not seeing the representation that is represented in our community, in our boards and commissions, or in the hallways of our schools, or in the hallways of City Hall. Then coming together to create a race equity framework that will improve equity and help us to achieve our city's mission, which is to make a city that is equitable for all. Then where we are today, which is public engagement, is bringing that conversation to you, to learn from you, to tell you what is it that we're working on, and to see how we can best improve. And together, we create a collective plan of action through implementation, and which is my dream, institutionalizing DIB across city government and schools. So, after doing that process, we were able to move forward, which is coming from the process to creating a product. We were able to conclude that these 4 products, which are our focus goals, were what the city of Beverly needed to be able to build a more inclusive Beverly. First, we needed to come with a racial equity plan to be able to bridge that gap that we saw on the income gap between our white and non-white communities, to be able to start improving that narrative that we experienced in the past regarding redlining, etc. And then we also brought language access, which allows us to support our community that speaks other languages than English. We also brought in a digital equity plan opportunity that allows us to address the barriers that those who are experiencing a digital divide continue to struggle with. We also focus on cultural identity, recognition, and heritage months. These 4 plans intersect to making a more inclusive Beverly. So, when we look at the numbers, we see that we've grown substantially in diversity, and nearly all new residents are non-white. What does this mean? This meant the creation of my position, because we needed to find and learn how to connect with these incoming communities. We have about 41% of Hispanic community that needs language access now in Beverly, and about 7% is non-Hispanic. We have 2 or more races, about 21%. Black or African Americans, about 19%, white, 8% in the city of Beverly overall. Language access need is about 8% for our entire city. So, I understand, and as we will hear from our panel this evening, that language access does intersect with race equity here in Beverly. And if we're going to build an inclusive city, I think these two need to be addressed together and not separately. Why? As we've seen, nearly all the residents that have moved here in the last 10 years are mostly Hispanic. They are our people of color that we are addressing. If they're not finding representation in government, if they're not participating in the economy, in democracy, because of a language barrier, then it might explain why we're not seeing that representation. It might explain why there might be shyness to access resources. And of course, considering the narratives that are going on in the country constantly, it might also make people a little bit more nervous. So I think by creating a language access plan, it allows us to reach more of our diverse communities. Why digital access? How is race equity, language access, and digital access connected? So it's 2024, and we all know we are receiving a lot of our information through devices. If you are having a language access barrier, and also you're having a digital access barrier, and you're a person of color, you're more likely to be left behind. We see that about 30% of our population in Beverly lacks internet access. We see about 20% of the annual household income of that population is between 20 and 74, and very few, about less than 5%, have 75,000 or more. So what does this tell us? That low income, and which is also connected with our race equity planning and our language access planning, is also contributing to the lack of digital access. So presently in Beverly, residents with computer access are about 7%, internet access 9% who do not have, 9% who do not have internet, and 6% who only use their internet through their phone. We also see that Beverly is 100% serviced by Comcast, and we all know they're very expensive. So this is sad sometimes, because I'm thinking you have a racial barrier, how you're connecting with your community, you're having a language access barrier, you're having a digital equity barrier, and you're also having a low income struggle. All these four connected allow us to continue to build a Beverly that is very exclusive to white communities only. And if we address digital equity and we're able to provide more access to devices, to internet, and to digital literacy, we will see more engagement with our services. We will see the representation we need in our boards and commissions. We will see that economic gap changing. We'll see more of our English as a second language learners becoming empowered and participating in our beautiful city. So, today we're going to be learning one more thing. I'm trying not to overload you. But there's a way that DIB works. When I started this position, Mayor Cahill promised me that this work will not rest on my shoulders only. And he's kept his promise through his leadership by ensuring that the REAP process is a process that we are all going through together, and that the product we create is truly authentic to us in Beverly. So one way that my office is supporting this work is I do lead processes with employees to define and develop racial equity frameworks. I also convene networks and long off-site meetings of all leaders of the core team departments to recraft and streamline the DIB mission statement. I work closely and individually with each department leaders to talk about goals and target setting outputs and outcomes. I do much more work recognizing knowledge gaps and developing and deploying the capacity to bridge them. Quarterly processes and product evaluations for both diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging office, and also for the teams across the city government. Target setting for timelines, quantity and quality of city activities to meet goals. So my office is playing a very specific chief, almost like a chief officer kind of a role, and it intersects with our consultants. Consultants very, very helpful to our work because they help us with evaluation, and sometimes the data that we collect, they help to communicate that back in context or in a way that they can support me, so I'm not doing all the work all alone. They also do data requesting and functional reviews, which is like a summary analysis of the design and desired impact of the city policies and practices. Our policies are usually kind of born out of the race equity work. So right now I'm feeling, as we're going past public engagement, that we as a city are ready for a race equity policy, a language access policy, and we'll start to see those being birthed out of this process. Also, HRNA advisors are great with staff validation, with interviews to supplement and validate analysis of policy and practices, and refinement of findings, discussions of draft findings, and refinement. The other part of REAP is your community voice, so constituents, businesses, and visitors, comments on outcomes, targets, outputs, and strategies. We did not specifically open the conversation to vision and mission, statements to comments from community voice, but we did invite engagement with outcomes, targets, outputs, and strategies. One way we did this is we are constantly hosting cultural recognition events, either at the library, either here at the Cabot, or the City Hall lawn, in the chamber, where we invite our communities from various backgrounds to share with us their stories, experiences, and also celebrate their achievements. REAP also has a core team. So the core team basically represents the departments that were audited in the race equity audit. The HRNA advisors, or consultants that came in Beverly in 2022, were not able to audit the entire city, but they picked 12 departments that were enough to be able to reflect an average outcome, average data that we could use to improve outcomes. And the role of the core team is operation planning, and that also includes validation. So if I have some ideas of the DIB office, or if Mayor has some ideas, we always check in with our team to make sure that it aligns with their vision and mission. They also help to identify key outcomes. They assist in measuring outputs and outcomes in their various departments, support with compliance assistance, and resource sharing. Resource sharing is how we, as a core team, exchange and pool resources. And one example is right now in a lot of race equity planning, and someone might be able to advance a certain piece of the work and share their ideas or their achievements or how they were able to improve their work with another, which then allows that person to piggyback off of their work, and that has been very helpful. So we have 12 members in our core team, and 7 departments were audited. Out of the 12 team members that are participating currently in REAP, our Race Equity Action Planning, are joining us here today, either sitting, but only 5 would be able to join us this evening because we wanted to make sure that we are able to get as much as we can and deep dive into their departments and not oversaturate the stage today. So the goal is to hold this annually so that you can continue to meet the other department heads and hear of their amazing work that they're doing. So the Beverly Racial Equity Action Planning will focus tonight on Racial Equity Plan, which I just explained, which will guide the city to ensure that race can no longer be used to predict the outcomes of all groups. And language access, which will guide to improve the practice of providing culturally inclusive, accessible communications and opportunities for engagement. How those two intersect with digital equity to guide the city as we work to improve the ability of all individuals and affected communities to have the technology and information needed to participate in the society. In society, the economy, and democracy. And one of my top favorites, the cultural identity recognition and heritage months. This will be a guide to ensure that we as a city continue to recognize and appreciate the diverse differences and commonalities among Beverly cultures. This plan will also raise awareness and allow us to examine our individual city cultural values, beliefs, and biases, and create a deeper understanding of how these factors can influence perceptions and interactions with others, as well as accessing city services and resources. So building a more inclusive Beverly is now looking more like a strategic plan and not a dream. Thank you to the team. Thank you to Mayor Cahill. Thank you to the creation of my position and the work we're doing with our consultants, your community voice, and your support, because you are my bosses. I do this for you. And we have been able to establish a vision, mission, an evaluation plan is still underway, but coming up quickly. An operation plan that is quarterly. It's more of a 6-month plan. We check in quarterly. And we're also moving into creating more access to accountability tools for our core team, as well as institutionalization. I'd like to talk a little bit about institutionalization. And this is the effort to ensure that the City of Beverly diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging goals-based leadership process will continue even after leadership ends. It's an effort to make sure that evidence-based, data-driven management directed to accomplishing clearly articulated visions, concrete visions, missions, and goals will become a part of City Beverly's organization's DNA. So I think going through that process of the discovery phase to creating a collective vision to action planning, what we are trying to do is almost like program ourselves, like train ourselves to think differently, to think more inclusively, then add that to our day-to-day activities so that over time, this is not something we have conversations about. It's something that is sustainable, it's something that we are managing, maintaining, and is normalized. So today, the moment we've been waiting for, we will have an opportunity to meet Director Chris Gomez Farewell, as well as Director Darlene Wynn, our Beverly Police Chief John LeLesher, our Public Schools Director Caitlin Beleza, and our Beverly Public Library Director Allison Babin. Please, with your permission, I'd like to invite them to join us on stage. Thank you. All right. So to kick this off, welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining us. I was tempted to introduce you myself because I have such amazing things to say about our team. I enjoy working with all of you, and in doing this very unpredictable, very rogue, very interesting work. And please, starting with to the right, please share your name, pronouns preferred but not required, your role in the City of Beverly government, what your department does, and why is building a more inclusive Beverly an important conversation for tonight?
Thank you. I sat at this end hoping you'd sat at that end, but I guess that was flawed. My name is John LeLesher. I'm the Chief of Police. I've been the Chief now. It'll be 11 years in November. I've been in law enforcement for 42 years. I grew up in Massachusetts in Lowell, but spent 32 years in the state of New Hampshire, and I was with the state police for 30 years. Retired from up there and took the job down here in 2013. It was probably one of the best moves I've ever made. Obviously, the police department is involved in every aspect of what we're doing here. It's important in our hiring practices, but it's also important in our enforcement practices and in assisting and helping the community. We are the first line of defense in enforcing and helping and protecting your civil rights. So when issues come up and they come to us, We have a civil rights officer that deals with hate crimes when they do occur, or hate incidents when they're reported, so we can fully investigate them. And we continue to work with the Commonwealth so they're all tracked. But one of the most important things, again, is like we said, is that we're your first line of defense. Anytime someone feels that they're not being treated fairly within the city, whether it's a criminal matter or not, you can always come to the police department. One of the other things I do sit on the Beverly Human Rights Committee, very active in that, so when issues arise again, we encourage people to come to us, notify me directly or our Community Impact Unit, and they will follow up on any matters reported.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Gomez. I'm the Executive Director of the Council on Aging, and we offer a litany of programming and services to seniors, meals, we have social workers, we do a lot of fun activities. Senior centers have evolved. Before, people would just think there were places where people went to play bingo and whatnot, but we help a lot of seniors with housing, SNAP. We offer transportation rides to go food shopping, medical appointments. We're really like a hub for everything that has to do with seniors, and we're just there to try to help them with anything we can. And if we can't help in-house, we refer them to the proper people, and we're just here to help the community as much as we can. We do a lot of fun activities. We give back, intergenerational programming. We do stuff with the schools in Beverly, and we're just really active, and we really want to be community-based and really open to all communities and just very helpful to everyone.
Hi, everybody. My name is Allison Babin. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the director of the Beverly Public Library. You probably know what the library does. I see some familiar faces out there. But I think, maybe some interesting things that might come up tonight is, I think the library has a really big role to play with digital equity, for example. And that may not be the first thing that you think of when you think of the public library. Everybody thinks of books. But there's a lot more to it. And my whole staff is really committed to this work, so I'm really excited to be here and to be a part of this conversation.
Good evening. My name is Caitlin Beleza. I'm the director of multilingual learner education in the Beverly schools. It's changed from English language learner, so it's constantly evolving. In my role, I oversee the K-12 programming for English learners. So that's the work that's happening in their classroom with ESL teachers. It's what's happening in their grade level or content classrooms with their certified teachers. I oversee the work with our former English learners. So those are students who are outside the instruction with an ESL teacher but are now being monitored for 4 years. I also work with our staff in terms of how are they providing instruction, what is working, what's not working. A lot of work with our multilingual families. How are they accessing the schools, the community, what's working for them, what are the gaps that they have. It's constantly evolving. We continue to welcome students. So I think for me, it's really important to have this conversation because in the schools, we do see frontline students who are coming in from neighboring towns throughout Massachusetts, other states across the country. We have students from places we've never seen in the 12 years that I've been in the Beverly schools, and then certainly all over the country. So just thinking, our families want to be involved in the city of Beverly, and so just being able to be part of that conversation and understanding what's going really well and where are places that we can work together to better support them.
Good evening, Darlene Nguyen. I'm the Director of Planning and Community Development for the City of Beverly. I've been in this role for 4 years, although I've worked for the city previously as the Assistant Director, so in total for 9 years. I use she, her pronouns. Shouldn't you ask me? What does the planning department do? What don't we do? We oversee 9 boards and commissions related to land use, historic preservation, open space, conservation, Community Preservation Act, historic economic development, Parking and Traffic Commission, and design review. So I kind of try to categorize it as we do short-range planning, development review, people who are coming in for applications to do larger projects in the city, but also long-range planning. So looking at the future of the city, whether it be our community housing plan or our master plan, who are we and what do we want to see from a built form and a built environment as we go forward in the next 10, 20 years. And related to that, I think I'd just clarify, our mission statement as a planning department is to foster a livable, sustainable, just, and equitable community. But I wanted to highlight in relation to this work specifically when we did our latest master plan was adopted in late 2020, so we refer to it as 2021 master plan, kind of guiding the future of the city for the next 10 years. And in regards to racial equity, our vision for that component was that we're a community that embraces our diversity and makes life better for historically marginalized populations by ensuring access to affordable housing choices, a safe and healthy environment, and opportunities to succeed for all current and prospective residents, business owners, employees, and the like. And so that is kind of how my work intersects with the work that Wangari does and how I'm involved here.
Thank you. All right, so we talked a little bit about REAP, the Race Equity Action Plan, and we learned that it intersects with language access, digital equity, and cultural recognition and Heritage Month's plan. And we're going to ask some questions tonight. I welcome you to start brewing some for later. I have a couple of my own, with your permission. I'd like to ask this first question. It's on racial equity. The City of Beverly conducted a racial equity audit in 2022, and using this data, the City of Beverly kicked off several historical context workshops in partnership with HRNA advisors to create a deeper understanding of the history of inequity both nationally and here in Beverly. First questions, Chief Lalesha. How have these race equity workshops inspired you in understanding the perspective of co-workers or residents whose identity or background differs from yours, and especially people of color?
So probably being involved with the Human Rights Committee was my first, even prior to the audit, and working, with those type of issues. And again, we all try to bring our personal or prior personal or family matters into what we do, and again that includes my family as well, having biracial relatives in my family, and working to look to what we could do. One of the problems we have with I should say a problem, but one of the issues that comes up with the police department and hiring on the sworn side is we're a civil service community. We can only hire from those who take the civil service test that are Beverly residents. So we learned through the audit we had to get much better at recruiting those that live in the city to try to get individuals to take the test. And we run into issues with civil service because we have to go by a numerical system on how people score and how they go through the oral process when they come into the department. So we're trying to get better at recruiting members of the existing community, which now include when students come into the colleges, they change the civil service rules so that residents of the colleges now living in Beverly can actually take the civil service test for the city if they decide they're at Endicott or Montserrat or North Shore and they realize that they really love the city. Now we can try to capture them into that. One of the other things we do is for the high schoolers, we do an intern project. This is done in the high school for all high school seniors, and we have an internship. We bring in about 30 different seniors in May for several weeks that intern with the police department. And they're exposed to every aspect of law enforcement. What we do, what the state does, the sheriffs, all the different special units, the federal side of it. I worked a lot with my federal partners in my prior employment with the state police, and more so now also, and guiding them towards law enforcement as a career. So working with trying to recruit the kids that come up through the system so that when they either go into the military or come out of college and they've taken the civil service test, we're getting them thinking about law enforcement in Beverly from those early ages. One of the other things that came up we talked about, and I didn't really talk about it originally, was the digital aspect. And we went from like 0 to 100. So when the audit came up, we realized we had to totally redo our website. What we had was insufficient. We want to make sure that more information goes out to the public on what's going on with the department, what's going on in the city, what our logs are now released so people can see what goes on. If they don't have access to the Salem News or to one of the news outlets, you can actually go on our website and see exactly what the officers are doing on a daily basis. And we try to do more engagement with our community impact unit in the different neighborhoods. We have the bike rodeos we do in the different neighborhoods all throughout the city to try to engage younger kids with the officers to defeat some of the possible fears that come out of different communities and we're going to continue to work on those things. But on the digital access side, and when Gary and I were sitting in my office trying to look at this, and we realized that the Commonwealth's website has a great translator, and we realized we didn't have one on our website, so I contacted our vendor, and we've added a translator now. So right now we have 4 languages: English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Albanian. And Albanian is a very heavy used language in the city of Beverly. We had Bootstraps in recently for a conversation. They said one of the #1 group of individuals that hit Bootstrap are Albanians. So we now have a translator on our website. So if you go to our website, you hit the translator, it totally changes everything into those languages. And Massachusetts general website, ma.gov, does the same thing. A lot of the forms and documents that we use come from the Mass government, whether they're registration forms, driver's license forms, all those can now be translated into, I think, the Mass was about 100 different languages on the Mass site. So we are learning, again, I'm learning every day on how we can improve the department.
Thank you, Chief. And I also want to commend you on your urgency and agency in getting your website up to date and more accessible for our community. And that's an important part of the work as well as we are learning. It's that agency and that urgency in responding to the issue. Chris? The City of Beverly has provided translation technology such as iPads and iPhones. Also, several departments have bilingual staff, which the COA does, and some also are using 24/7 interpreter and translator services to increase access to the city's resources and services for our multilingual community. Please share one example of how your department has used translation tools or interpretation services during your day-to-day operations to meet the needs of a resident speaking a language other than English, and how successful was your translation in meeting the residents' needs?
So we use the translation iPad very frequently as well. In our newsletter, we have posted that we have Spanish-speaking staff, which is me, and so we have quite a few Spanish-speaking residents will come in, and I'm glad to meet and greet them and speak to them, and they come in frequently now. We have very good conversations. We also put all our registration forms in Spanish as well, and we try to bridge the gap by doing anything possible. We lend out our laptops as well. People come in and use our laptop to try to communicate and use the Wi-Fi as well. So yeah, we try to just be accessible for all languages. We have a big Albanian senior community that comes in as well. We have a volunteer that he translates a lot for us, and he's like a leader in the community, and we're very thankful to have him because he communicates a lot of our information to the Albanian community. And we're trying to grow our influence with the Portuguese community as well. We go out into the community a lot. We've been to every senior housing and done presentations, and we've met with everyone from the senior housing, trying to see, what communities are underserved and how we can better help.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, at the Council on Aging, there's a lot of great work going around language access. You have some classes as well. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, we have a Spanish class where it's probably in its like 6th semester. Our seniors love it. They'll practice. They'll have their class. Actually starts tomorrow again, and then they'll come into my office and saying a couple phrases and stuff. We're hoping to expand it to other languages as well, and then my hopes are that eventually we can have ESOL classes as well. I would love to have that at the senior center as well.
Thank you, Chris. Language access is both a legal and an ethical mandate to ensure that all residents receive equal access to city services and resources, regardless of the language we speak, where we come from, or what our circumstances are. Everyone deserves to understand and to be understood. Please, Director Babin, share what actions you can implement to advance how non-English language residents are accessing the library.
I would love to. So first and foremost, we've made a few strides in making our library card application more available. So right now that's available in 9 languages other than English. And sometimes we use that iPad that we have at the library too to help with the translation as we assist a person with filling out that application. We also have multilingual collections at the library, and I'm really excited to have the opportunity to talk about that here because I don't know if people realize that. So we have an adult collection in other languages, in Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, and Chinese. We also have a pretty extensive children's collection that is multilingual, over 20 languages. We have about 500 books in that collection right now, but we're adding to it and growing it every year. It might sound very simple, just buy books in other languages, like how hard can that be? But it's actually pretty complicated because we don't speak all of those languages on the staff, and you have to find specialized vendors who sell those books. So we have librarians now that are really committing to that work and seeking out those materials. We also completely updated our website in 2022, and part of that was having the Google Translate feature built in. I know it's not perfect. Caitlin has helped educate us on some of its limitations, but it is something that we're able to add and offer. We're also rolling out a language translation line so that we'll be able to better assist patrons when they come into the building by calling this number and having a live interpreter on the phone that can help us communicate with someone that is fluent in another language. And last but not least, hopefully some folks have seen our story walk out and about around the city. I'm excited to share that this coming summer, we're going to do a bilingual story walk. So this summer, it will be in English and Spanish. So those are just a few of the things. And I also really want to say we definitely want to hear more. Like, the library is here for you, and if there are ways that we aren't serving you or people you know adequately, like, please reach out. We always want that feedback.
Thank you. And Caitlin is joining us from the schools. So this race equity audit tapped into not only our city staff, but also we audited the schools, and the city council is also part of our core team. So our core team is comprised of very diverse leadership, and so we're very pleased to have you here. Could you please tell us a little bit about language access as it pertains to the schools?
So similar to the rest of the departments that I'm fortunate enough to be up here tonight, it has been a process for us. It's been Google translating documents and using our phones when I first started to really building an entire system now. So we do have, we call it kind of language access tiers, if you will. We have a manual that goes along with it of what the different things are, who they're available to, and when, why we would use them. So we do have the iPads, we call them iPads for language access, that are available at all of our front offices. We have them in the nurse's office, we have them in the guidance counselor, and the intention is not to replace a human interpreter, but to be that first step to understand what is happening, what does a family or a child, a student need assistance with, so then we can get the correct resource. So it's been really helpful when families are enrolling and they have a document, or they've gone to the doctor's office and they brought something in and they don't know what it is, to quickly use Google Photo, that Google Lens, and know, oh, okay, this needs to go to guidance, or this needs to go elsewhere, and start the conversations. We do have a contracted translation and interpreting service that we use. We use that for, when it comes to translation, that's the document piece of things, binding things like our policies to make sure that our families, when they're initialing things, they understand what it is they're reading. For things like IEPs for students in our special education program, that would go through formal translation. The interpretations for meetings, so that could be an open house. Those are IEP meetings, parent conferences, an attendance conference. If we're hosting something, a celebration, and we know we have families coming with other language preferences, we would tap into them to come in and provide that service. We also use an over-the-phone interpreting service, and I would say that has by far been our biggest bridge closer, gap closer in the public schools. Our nurses love it. I've had comments back of like, this has helped me really do my job, right? Of being able to get on the phone with someone immediately, real time, and have a conversation just like we would with any English-speaking family or caregiver. So we use it certainly on the phone. We can use it on speaker really quickly. Again, if there's a crisis situation and we need to know what's going on, it's been immediate, and that's been probably the strongest feedback that we've gotten from our staff and our families of how it's truly open to a communication and helped us better understand again, what's going on, what's working, what else do we need to do to support our families.
Thank you. Could you tell us a little bit more about the phone? I'm curious how it works. I'm assuming I'm talking in English and the person is hearing a different language, or?
Yeah, so it's, you know, I certainly, it's a learning curve. The first phone call I made, I wrote out a whole script. Why am I calling? What am I saying? And it certainly is helpful to plan. The provider that we use has over 240 languages readily available. You can get someone to interpret for you in Spanish or Portuguese within seconds. So I call, we have a dedicated line that we call into. We do departmentalize what we're calling just so we can keep track of, is it a lot of calls coming from our assistant principals and why, what's happening? Or is it a lot of nurse phone calls? Once you make, that initial ID number, you identify who you are. An interpreter comes right on the line. We give them a quick overview. Hey, I'm calling because Josie hasn't shown up for school today, and I'm just trying to understand what's going on. They can do the three-way calling for you, which is really helpful in the schools. We have lots of different phones, so depending on where I am on any given day, the phone is different. But they can do the call immediately. They do ask, if no one answers, what would you like me to do? They are willing to leave voicemails for you as well, which is really great. And then I have messaged out to our families that we have this service. If you are calling back, please tell whoever answers the phone, that administrative assistant, the clerk, that you need the interpreter in Portuguese or Spanish, and then they can connect that. So it is not simultaneous, so they're not speaking at the same time that you are. Rather, I would say a sentence or two and pause, and then the interpreter speaks, the person on the other end can respond, the interpreter interprets, I speak again, so it's kind of this triangular piece. And it works really smoothly. I've been really pleased with it. It's been really nice, again, to be able to have these quick conversations and realize, well, the child hasn't come to school for 2 days because they're waiting for a bus and they just didn't know where to go and didn't know who to contact, and we were able to troubleshoot and solve immediately. So it's been really awesome.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's amazing how, when we think of public service, it becomes these day-to-day activities, and how we are connecting not only with each other at our workplaces, but also with our community, and then also how our community is accessing us. And I think that whole dance needs to be very inclusive and very conscious in order to have a inclusive Beverly, but more importantly, to be a resilient and thriving community. So thank you, everyone, for all the work that you do. So to improve access to our underserved communities, the City of Beverly kicked off digital equity in August of 2024 to improve the ability of all individuals and communities affected by the digital divide in Beverly to have the technology and information needed to participate in society, economy, and democracy. In 2024, most information is distributed digitally, and underserved communities here in Beverly are still being affected by the digital divide. I know that the planning department interacts a lot with our community. What are some alternative methods, apart from digital access or tools, can your department use to ensure that the information shared from your department is reaching communities affected by the digital divide?
Well, first I'll say there's been this transition too over time since 2020 to move to more digital, right? More meetings are held online. We're putting all of our permits online, and as a department that we interact with homeowners a lot, or business owners, or individuals looking to get permits, that can be a challenge. They don't always understand how to complete the applications, regardless of what that issue is. Sometimes people are just not, they either don't have the internet access, they don't have a computer, or they really just don't understand the technology. And those are all fine things. And so what we will do as we put everything, as we work, and we are going live with our online permitting that matches the building department this fall, but we will also always have options for people to call and talk on the phone. I would love to have the translation service. We don't have that yet, but that would be probably fantastic as well. They can email, and also they can come in. And we really, in our department, pride ourselves on customer service. And we will help anybody that comes into our office and teach them, walk them through the permit, print it out for them. They don't have to fill it out online. We'll upload it and put it online for them if that's easier, just so it gets in our files. But the other part of it too is, that's people coming to us. And what I have learned through this process and even before, we started interviewing some businesses from traditionally underserved communities. I invited them into City Hall prior to Wangari arriving here under the prior DEI director. And what I heard from them was, it's not really part of our culture to come to City Hall, or we're not really used to being in City Hall. This intimidates me. And so part of our engagement strategy in the planning department is going to find people where they are. And so by going to different city events and hopefully working more with Wangari and other community members to identify places where we can go to connect with people in the community so that they don't have to feel like they can only come see us at City Hall. We can be out with them and in the community, and we need, admittedly, to do it more than we are doing it. It can be really hard to step away from the desk, but that is kind of our future strategy, is to go find people and teach them what we do.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Darlene. And I share a floor with the planning department. I'm right across, and I've seen your staff constantly go out of their way, not only to meet the needs of their department, but sometimes the needs of constituents just walking down the hallway looking for guidance, for maybe they're on the wrong floor, they're looking for somewhere to be. So I thank you and your staff and your leadership in building a more inclusive Beverly. We have a last question from my end, and it wouldn't be more of a question, it's more of like a comment that I want to make just to conclude this. And I'd like to open the floor for a community discussion. If you would have any questions, maybe in the next couple of minutes, we'll begin to invite you to engage. So in the last 10 years, Beverly's population has grown in diversity, which has been met with increased need for representation and inclusion of diverse identities and backgrounds. The change in Beverly community makeup and continued increase in existing diversity awareness has inspired opportunities for learning of the national and local contributions of affected populations through our Heritage Identity Recognition Plan. So you might have seen us host, an example would be the Jewish American Heritage Month, where we were able to reflect on the contributions of the Jewish community in Beverly. I found this conversation very inspiring, and it helped me to deeply understand how Beverly became Beverly today. A lot of our Jewish community were part of establishing small businesses, part of building community centers that later became our generation that are in their 50s and 60s, who are now holding Beverly's economy and whose children are now in our high schools and colleges. And also, this awareness has improved recognition and appreciation of our diverse differences and commonalities among Beverly culture. This awareness has also increased understanding of the history of racism in America and in Beverly, and how cultural values, beliefs, and biases can influence perceptions and interactions. One way that we as a city are working to make Beverly more inclusive with culture, identity, and heritage months in mind is we are centering a lot of our conversations on identity pronouns. And identity pronouns are the pronouns that a person uses to refer to themselves, or the pronouns that they want to be used when their name is not being used. And this helps to support our LGBTQ community and help them feel a sense of belonging, and that we are aware of their journey and respect their perspective and wishes. So often our staff will have an experience. I've had an experience where I get very, very confused, and this is okay. And we are all navigating this very attentively, and we pray and hope that each day, as our country changes, and it's changing constantly, that we can keep up as a team in making everyone feel included. The City of Beverly also collaborates with our local cultural and religious partners, and this is very valuable to building a more inclusive Beverly. So some of our departments, actually all our departments, our schools, our city council meetings, work with a DI calendar, and also check in with our religious leaders or cultural leaders to make sure we're not scheduling public meetings, let's say on holy days or on religious holidays. And also if there's a cultural recognition opportunity, that the city is on top of it, and that we are either proclaiming the month, or we are raising a flag in honor of that community, community, or we are opening an opportunity to meet this community, either for the first time. I don't think we had done a Jewish American Heritage Month before in Beverly, and this month we are celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month, so happy Hispanic Heritage Month. And to our Asian community, happy autumn moon. So continuing to embrace one another and celebrate these differences and commonalities really helps us to build a more inclusive Beverly. Thank you for allowing me to ask all my questions. Thank you so much for your participation and your kindness. And I want to welcome our audience for a question or two. If it's all right, please walk. We can pass the mic, or thank you.
Hi, my name is Sarah. I applaud your efforts for digital access and translation, and I encourage every budget to include, live translation where it can, whether it's over the phone or iPad in person. But I have a question for when you're using iPad or translation into like a document form, to consider that you're, I guess, assuming that the person is literate. And I do a volunteer work with refugee families, and we've come into situations where mom's not literate. And often I'm at the doctor's office with her, and we're handed a form in the language, but what is she gonna do with it? Or I'm signed up to Class Dojo because it gets, even if it's translated, what are they gonna do with it? And so I just want to encourage you to consider that in the instances where things are translated, it's assuming that the person is also literate. But I absolutely applaud your efforts to translation and digital access.
Thank you so much for sharing that experience. Any comments? Has anyone experienced that?
One thing I can say is that on the legal side, we have to have certified translators for any court actions. We just can't bring in, I have a Brazilian officer, I have a Spanish speakers. I just can't bring them in to do a legal translation. So we have a list of people through the district attorney's office that we have to use who are specifically trained and licensed to do the legal, anything that could go to court translations. And one of the things we talk about translations, you bring it up, and I wanted to mention it earlier. I had an incident where I was having an officer who was Dominican trying to translate, and the person was Guatemalan. It's totally different dialect. So when you say Spanish, that doesn't cover all the different dialects. I mean, Asian languages, there's so many different dialects. So we have to break it down to what part of, especially in Asia, between Laotians, Cambodians, Vietnamese, where are you from specifically? What dialect do you speak specifically to make sure you get the proper services?
Thank you. Any more questions?
Hi, my name is Esther, and I teach ESL at Beverly Bootstraps. And one group I haven't heard you mention, which is a growing group, are Haitians. And I'm wondering, I know we brought our class, by the way, to the library twice and got our students to get library cards, and you guys were great about supplying things in lots of languages. But in my classes, #1, Portuguese speakers, #2, Spanish, #3, French and Creole. And is that something that's in the offing to address that as well?
So hopefully at the library, you did experience that we do have a library card application in Haitian Creole, and we have some books available in the language as well. Definitely an area that we need to continue expanding, and I'd love to talk to you or hear from you about more things we can do at the library. That's kind of where we are right now.
And I would say similarly in the schools, we are just starting to welcome families who are requesting interpretation and translation in Haitian Creole. So we have all of our district policies and forms available in Spanish, Portuguese, Albanian, and Arabic already. But looking at, we certainly can get the interpretation very quickly, but how do we provide that for Haitian Creole as well is something that we're starting to do.
Question over here.
You shared so beautifully about the plan that's unfolded over time. And I work at the Cabot, So help run the community conversations. And of course, sometimes when we promote events like this, we get some negativity on social media. And there does seem to be a sort of backlash or exhaustion around DEIB. And I would just love to hear how you work with that in your own professional life and partnerships. And if you're seeing the same thing, maybe you're not seeing it the same way I'm seeing it, but are you seeing that backlash or exhaustion, and how are you working with that to move forward with this such important work?
Thank you, Maureen. Anyone wants to take that one? I'm setting you guys up. So as I mentioned earlier, DI is a hot topic nationally, and it can be politicized. And just like every other conversation, it can go one way or the other. Specifically for Beverly, that is not what we are centered on. Our conversation continues to be positive, and it continues to be centered on building a more inclusive Beverly. That does not mean that they're not ongoing things that we would rather have not going. It does not mean that there are people in our community that still don't believe in facts. It does not mean that we don't continue to see inequity. It just means that the majority of our community and our staff are very inclusive-minded and community-centered and are very supportive of my office and my work. I am a one-person department, and there is a lot of work. So one way I guess I avoid exhaustion is I do ask for collaboration, I ask for help, I ask for support. I lean a lot on my chief of staff and Mayor Cahill, as well as our human resources and our core team to support me through this work. When I do get exhausted, I do know how to take a walk or talk to someone when I need that. Overall, part of the Massachusetts DEI Coalition, and I want to say that that is my Beverly experience. It might not be the experience of every other DI practitioner, but personally, it's been positive and centered on community. Any more questions? Yes. Apologies. Sorry.
Thank you, Paul. Hi, I have more of a comment than a question. My name is Georgina. I live in downtown Beverly. And when I go for walks, I sometimes like to walk up to the charming neighborhood of Fish Flake Hill, which is, kind of behind where Rowan's Market used to be and up the hill, obviously. And I always find it very charming. And you see old photographs of the cod being dried on lines, row after row of codfish being dried, and that was such a great industry. It was so important to Beverly and the North Shore. Well, then I learned a friend of mine is currently in the process of writing a book about the slave trade and how it enriched the North Shore, and I'm thinking about what you said. It's so important to know history, because what I found out is because Fish Flake Hill, the reason that all this cod was being dried was because it was the cheapest source of protein that could be provided to the slave ships as they went down to the Dominican Republic or wherever. And that really changes your attitude, So I just wanted to say how important it is to know and keep abreast. And I'm just learning. So thank you for your presentation tonight, and hopefully we'll all learn more. Paul.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm Paul Willenbrock. I'm a Long Island boy, but I've lived in Beverly for 50 years on Prospect Hill. And I have comments to most of you here. I will start with the Chief of Police. This is not directly directed to the topic, except that coming on up right now, for all of you to know, are votes for the police to work and be trained to work more effectively with autistic and the disabled. It's on the topic to be voted on, and it's also, I hope that that's followed. And I also would like to say to the Chief of Police that as I talk to him and I talk to others, I really would love to see more people that are non-white on the police force, and I know you're trying to get them like that. I also think the police are wonderful in Beverly. Then I go to the Beverly Senior Center, The Beverly Senior Center is a great place in many ways. One of the best places it is because if you're over 60, I know hardly any of you here are over 60, but if you're over 60 on Wednesday and Thursday, I don't care if you live in Arizona, you can get everything free vegetables. Wednesday and Thursday, think about it. And I also think they do have a lot of good activities, but my concern would be, even though I go to a class of 50 women who do senior workouts and do everything at the senior center, I see very few people of color at the senior center. And I think more needs to be done there, except I see people of color that help the old people come in, but that's about it, okay? I really think a lot more needs to be done with that. And with the Beverly Library, you're the best, period.
Woo! Thank you.
If I can comment back to Paul, because we have these conversations all the time. So again, a lot of it's product of civil service, but we talk about equity. So when I came here, there were 2 female police officers and the rest white male. Now we have 8 female police officers. We have 1 African American police officer, 1 Portuguese, Brazilian, first generation Brazilian officer, Pakistani officer, and so the thing is, the city is changing, and we're evolving too. Our director of police and fire dispatch is a woman of color, and a lot of the dispatchers, we have a Hispanic dispatcher now and other females, so the entire city is changing, and I think all of our departments are changing with it.
Absolutely, and also as city staff, we are taking the precautions and putting in the work that we need to allow retention. So it's not just about inviting staff members to join or workers to join, it's also making sure that they're in an environment where they're not experiencing microaggressions or where they're not always looking back or trying to prove themselves. And I really thank the City of Beverly. It's been a wonderful place for me to work, and I welcome you to share when we have job postings. We are constantly trying to reach more people. We want to see more diversity in our application pool. Because the application pool does determine whom we hire. So the pool is the most important part, and so if you have young ones that are graduating, send them our way. More questions?
Can I
please?
follow up on
Yes,
that?
Thank you.
I agree wholeheartedly, having in the last 2 years entirely replaced all of my staff, some twice. The pool is limited. And I think part of it too is seeing people like you in the environment where you want to work as well. And I want that to extend as well to, mentioned before, my department staffs 9 boards and commissions in the city. I also really, one of our primary goals is to diversify the boards and commissions that serve the city, the volunteers who represent the city, to more align with our changing population. And I think we're constantly striving to get to that point. To have boards and commissions that look more like what the city looks like in our population. And that change is somewhat recent, but certainly like anybody, this is always my pitch, we need you to volunteer. And it's great work, it's great public service, but anybody, if you know somebody who's interested in serving on a board and commission, there's a form to fill out online. And we, it's really important to have a broad diversity on those boards. So,
Yeah, thank you. Chris?
Yes, Paula, I agree with you 100% as well. I would love to see a more diverse people coming into the senior center. So as soon as I started working here, I think maybe the next month, we started doing monthly or bi-monthly cultural events where it's an expose of different countries and cultures, and with food, music, and dance, which is, I think, the pillars of bringing people together. And once you're exposed to another different culture or country, it becomes more normal to you and intriguing and beautiful. I grew up in a very diverse city, and it was beautiful to me, seeing different cultures. It became the norm to me on Chinese New Year, seeing baby powder thrown around and things of that nature. And I kind of wanted to bring that here. So, we try to do it every month or every other month. In October, we'll be doing a celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month. We'll have dancers from representing different countries with their native dances, and we'll try to get food from as many countries as we can, and, you know, just celebrate together. And I think it's a beautiful thing, and we hope to grow and have a more diverse population come in as well.
Absolutely, and those events are amazing. I remember maybe sometime this year or last year you got some food from a West African restaurant in Lowell, and I drive to Lowell just to eat at this West African place. I'm like, how did Chris even know that this place exists? So it's really a wonderful space, Paul. I might move my office. So that's wonderful. And when we talk about diversifying our boards and commissions, I think having this public engagement event today is so important in building trust. I know that a lot of our diverse communities have lost trust in government, that we actually authentically care. And I was hoping that one thing we can take home today and we can share with our family members is that the city of Beverly is a different place, that we are an inclusive staff, and that we are dedicated to a sense of belonging for all people in Beverly. I also know that a lot of our languages other than English are seeing what is going on in the media, and that does not reflect who we are as a city. And I'm hoping that this conversation continues to build that trust so we can see that representation and that fear of public sector opportunities kind of reducing. I welcome a few more questions. I was hoping we could go till 8:30, but if we have 10 more minutes, we can welcome maybe 2 or 3 more.
Hi, thank you. My name is Mindy. Thank you all for being here, and it was really great to hear about all of your work, but particularly the language access plan. And my question is, it sounds like every department sort of has their own strategy and like execution plan, and I'm wondering if, you know, what is the, like, is there like budgetary priority for this and kind of an overarching, you know, implementation plan or expectation, like through the race equity audit, or if that's totally separate? And then also, how would a person know that there are these language translation services? So I'm a parent of 2 school-age kids, and so I'm aware that the materials that I get from Hannah Elementary School, for example, come in, you know, different translations, different languages. And so things like the senior center or the planning department, you know, I guess I would love to hear of what a plan is to promote the language access before a person gets to the table or the counter or the window or whatever for their transaction. And then Darlene totally threw me off because talking about boards and commissions, because I'm also a member of the Beverly Human Rights Committee. And in terms of, we are looking for members, and we want membership to reflect what Beverly looks like and experiences. And we are working to try to make membership more accessible. Like there may be some applications for certain committees, but I think that if you're interested in being involved, there are ways around perhaps a formal application if there are linguistic or literacy barriers. So sorry, that was a lot. There were some questions in there, but I understand I did a lot of comments.
It's all right, Mindy. I have the pleasure of working with Mindy and Chief and I on the HRC, and thank you so much for volunteering and for all the collaborations that you've seen through to allow Beverly to continue to enhance equity work. So to answer your question, as I explained a little bit earlier, how REAP is a process and a product, what determines the product is the process. And what I'm hoping is, as we continue to have these conversations internally as city government and externally with you, that we will continue to expose the need and the barriers, and hence be able to stand in front of city council with some real data, with some real with real world stories to be able to make a request for an increase of a budget or a language access coordinator. That would be lovely. Currently, the reason you're seeing the work falling into the specific departments is because we are allocating the work due to the lack of that centered language access coordination. The goal, though, is all our individual language access plans will intersect to create one whole language access plan that will cover the entire city of Beverly. That language access plan will have some promises and some asks, and that will be having some phone translation services. Like Darlene said, would be really wonderful for her to have that support in her department. But for us to get there, we need to be here today. We need to take these steps slowly and steadily and be able to create a narrative that gets the buy-in that we need. I know that there will be opportunities for the City of Beverly to tap into some grants this for year 25 as this becomes a more normalized conversation across city government. Does that help, Mindy? We have room for one more question before we close.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jasmine Ramon. I'm the Director of Equity and Inclusion for the town of Danvers, so I'm their Wangari. Just someone to a previous question about how DEI practitioners are doing in this time. If I think of this lovely human who's been running the microphone around all evening, some of you have noticed him and some of you haven't, but I feel like that's kind of a metaphor for how I'm doing, but that's just a side. The question I have, knowing from experience, it's one thing to have the tools and be like, yay, I did it, I got the tools. And then you have to convince an entire staff to change their culture, to change the way it's always been done, to really understand the why and the how. Chief, you gave a good example of, you get the translation tool that's going to translate your website, but it's a whole other level of cultural competency and cultural humility to understand, for example, that Dominican and Guatemalan Spanish are entirely different things. So I'm curious how you all have been able to really potentially bridge that gap, be the champions and role models for that among your staff, and perhaps even overcome resistance in some cases. So you're not just giving out tools and saying we're doing them, but you know that your staff, colleagues, peers actually believe in that why and are understanding why they're using them.
I guess I can start. So again, I always like to say this, that I feel that the men and women of the department I work with are the best of the best. We hire the best we can, we train them as well as we can. And a lot of the incidents that we get involved with, we're going to calls. We're not having people just come in all the time. We're showing up. There was an accident or there was some type of disturbance, so we're going to. So it's important when we get there is to immediately find out, like I said, if there's a language issue and cultural issues, because some cultures, are more I don't know the word I want to say, but they're more active when they speak. Some people may think that's aggressive, but it's really not. And they like to, negotiate things. And so we have to teach our offices, no, that's just cultural. And get deep into where they're from and what services can we provide. Because if I take the translator on my phone and just bring up a language in Spanish and try to translate, that's not going to work. So we have to really ask the questions. We have to take our time. We have to investigate. We have to ask where they're from. Specifically try to find out, and then get a translation service that specifically will help us further the investigation, or just assist them. It could be a simple thing like, they need a tow truck, a broken down car. And in training, we're doing Chiefs training this week in Norwood, and we just had a class by the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Association, and they have a pamphlet now. So if we go to a call and we find someone who's deaf or hard of hearing, they can actually point on the card what help they need. Chief O'Connor and I were just talking about that, how the fire department can use that for medicals. So we're learning and constantly trying to come up with new avenues and new technologies to help as many people as we can.
Thank you. And I think having the support of Mayor Michael Cahill and having the DI position intersecting with the team and the work we've done with the audit and historical context has helped for us not to have this conversation as if it happened in the past. We've been able to learn more, and it's been more of a personal journey. I think in the beginning, personally, it was, because as a woman of color trying to work for the city of Beverly, some people told me, don't. So it is a personal journey for me, and it's personal how. As a woman of color, I learned that the experiences that I was afraid of were not real, but it did not mean that there were no inequities ongoing in Beverly. It does not mean I don't experience it, I do. But the more that we have that conversation, the more that we as the staff feel grounded when someone criticizes or when someone offers a recommendation to be more inclusive, if we are less defensive, because we are getting the tools and the resources that we need to move through that emotion or through that journey, or we feel safe or we trust that environment. I think preparing the soil and setting that table is the hardest part of what we do, Jasmine. I think it's just, the tools are there, but how do you get staff to engage with those tools and then to be able to meet outcomes? I know that the race equity finding has been my to-go-to a lot, because we all thrive in public sector through making the world a better place, and I think that is a huge part of how we are motivated. And also, as human beings, we like to be recognized for the great things that we do, so I think there's different ways to motivate one another through this work. And we also foster a very brave space. We wouldn't say safe, but we try to maintain like a safe space where we don't cancel each other. If someone uses a language that maybe they're not aware is exclusive, we are able to work with that person to build their repertoire or empower them in this journey. I do still think there is a lot of mystery in the work. I think we'd all agree in terms of how it's unfolding. It's the kind of work that you can't build a manual for. I don't know if that makes sense. You have to go through it. It's literally identity changing. It changes how you think, how you look at yourself, how you look at other people, and how they look at you all of a sudden makes more sense. And I think if you are able to get to that space where you're comfortable with your own identity, and you're comfortable with other identities that are not like yours, and then you know how to navigate that because you're fully centered in your space, then you can engage with this work. But how do you get there? There's no magic wand. I just think it's having these conversations, fostering a loving and kind and patient environment, and knowing when to take a break and when to come back later and reassess. Thank you so much. Chris, please go ahead. 1 second, please.
To Jasmine's point, I think when working with people that speak different languages or different dialects, I think the most important thing is just to take your time and show that you actually care and you're there to help them. I say it a lot, like when I see people coming to the senior center, I see them all like as if they were my grandparents and how I would want them to be treated. And I try to portray that to my staff because, you know, we all have our own battles. We're coming in with different things, and language access can be a huge issue. So we have a gentleman that we're helping. He's from Serbia. We can't find anyone that speaks, you know, his dialect, but he comes to us frequently because he knows that he's going to a place where he's going to be respected and you know, and helped. So, you know, I think that's the biggest thing, that we can continue to just show people the love and respect, and that we're here to help them.
Thank you, Grandpa.
Thank you, Grandpa.
I want to welcome our audience that has a comment for us or question.
Thank you. Just one brief point. This has been a very positive, informative session focusing on some of the linguistic barriers to community participation. I would encourage you to do a future session that's focused on people who are neurodiverse, maybe have a cognitive limitation, behavioral health issue that affects their ways of communicating, or people with physical limitations that prevent them to fully participating in the community. I think if you had a session like that, that would be a nice companion to what you had this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul, and thank you for all that you do for us here in the city of Beverly. Paul has been a longtime member of the HRC committee. And to answer, I am the ADA coordinator for the city of Beverly, and I agree with you. I would love to have a conversation around ADA. I also want to welcome your engagement in our Commission on Disabilities. We're officially meeting quorum. I'm embarrassed to say it's been over a decade since the Commission on Disabilities in Beverly met, and I'm very proud to say that our volunteers have shown up. Mr. Paul Willenbrock is one of our new members, and we're meeting tomorrow. So if you're around, please join us as we begin making Beverly more accessible. And maybe, again, it's the process that might lead to a product, like a community conversation to advance ADA. Thank you so much for joining us. And before I go, I'd like to invite you on Tuesday, the 24th, to join us at the Beverly Public Library for Unlocking Language Access in Beverly. This is a community program. It's a free program, and it will be taking place at the Public Library next Tuesday at 6 p.m. in the Sohair Room. Please, you're welcome to join us and bring some ideas to be part of Unlocking Language Access in Beverly. Please help me in giving our core team and our panelists a loud applause. I would also like to thank Kimberly Ballard and Maureen and the Cabot staff for hosting us this evening. And also to our audience that are joining us via BevCam, I want to thank BevCam for being present here today to record this to make it more accessible for those who were not able to join us. Please let this not be the last time we have this conversation. As you can tell, my office and all offices are open for you to come and continue this conversation in how that it affects you individually or what you would like to see more of. Thank you, everybody, and have a good night.